Emma and Tom Talk Teaching, a podcast about all things education, presented by Emma O'Dooher and Tom Breeze. What's going on with maths in Wales? The quality of mathematics education across Wales remains too variable, with many pupils underperforming due to inconsistent teaching and insufficient subject-specific support, according to a new thematic report from Estyn. The report draws on evidence from recent school inspections, thematic visits to primary, secondary and all-age schools and national survey responses. Whilst the report identifies pockets of effective practice in mathematics teaching and curriculum planning, overall, too many schools fall short in key areas including subject knowledge, pedagogy and the use of assessment to guide teaching. Inspectors found that where teaching was most effective, teachers held high expectations, used a range of responsive assessment techniques and ensured that pupils developed a deep understanding of mathematical concepts. In contrast, less effective teaching often lacked challenge and did not address misconceptions effectively. The report also highlights a concerning decline in subject-specific professional learning and support for teachers, which contributes to gaps in confidence and competence, particularly around the curriculum for Wales. In some cases, teachers relied too heavily on bought-in schemes of work without sufficient adaptation to meet pupils' needs. The report identifies the need for a coherent and comprehensive mathematics curriculum that builds progressively on pupils' learning and includes authentic contexts for application. Schools with the strongest outcomes often demonstrated collaborative curriculum planning, clear progression models, and a balance between explicit instruction and opportunities for pupils to explore and reason independently. Estyn has made a series of recommendations to the Welsh Government, local authorities, regional consortia and school leaders to strengthen the quality of mathematics teaching and ensure that all pupils, regardless of where they live, have access to high-quality mathematics education.
So that was a press release from Estyn, the school's inspectorate here in Wales, which came out in June of 2025, almost a year after we put together an episode on the podcast which dug into concerns about variability in the teaching of phonics in Welsh schools. So we're back now in front of the microphones discussing inconsistency again, this time in maths. We want to find out what's behind Estyn's concerns, what the situation is on the ground, and where we go from here. And to do that, we've pulled together three people who can help us. So we've got Cameron Stewart, who is the programme leader for PGCE Secondary Maths here at Cardiff Met and was previously a strategic advisor and subject specialist for maths at Central South Consortium. We've got Sian Wickersham, who teaches maths and numeracy on our PGCE primary programmes and was previously deputy head of teacher development at the ARC Schools Multi-Academy Trust in England. And we've got Laurence Hooper, who's fresh out of the box. He's just graduated from Cardiff Met with a PGCE in secondary maths. Welcome to all of you. You all right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, so let's get into it. A sort of general question to begin with, and I am going to come to you, Laurence, first on this because, you know, you've just done your PGCE, you're hopefully feeling quite positive about the profession. So it's what from the report resonated most with you and your recent experience as PGCE student teacher, now NQT?
Yeah, so I am positive about coming into this profession. It seems like it's going to be really good, exciting time. But the report did highlight the variability and with a number of teachers who aren't subject matter specialists for maths. And I think that's really concerning about the education a lot of pupils are getting in Wales. If you're lucky enough to have a maths specialist, somebody who's trained in maths teaching you, they're going to have a far greater understanding of how to put the complex ideas of mathematics across. If you've got a non-specialist teacher, say a PE teacher or a history teacher teaching you, they won't have the same understanding of how to put those ideas across. And I think that does make it challenging for them. And I appreciate that head teachers are probably deploying their resources where they can. But I'd really like to see, more maths specialist teachers teaching maths in schools where possible.
Thank you. What about you, Sian? What got your goat or got you?
So yeah, I agree with Laurence, and I also think the point around professional learning, there's quite a big focus on professional learning, is really important, because we are in this situation where we've got non-math specialist teaching in secondary, and also in primary. It's very rare for there to be a math specialist primary teacher. Most people are generalists. So actually that lack of subject-specific professional learning and support, I think, is really highlighted. For me, the thing that really stood out is the sort of why behind all of this stuff. So they say in that press release, too many schools are relying on bought-in schemes of work. And that's probably, I defer to the secondary specialist, but in primary, that's often the case. So often for maths, a scheme of work like White Rose Maths is a big one, big maths will be bought in by a school. The question is why, though? Why are schools feeling the need to do that in maths? And again, it comes down perhaps to a lack of subject knowledge and a lack of kind of subject specific skills, but also I think it comes down to the Curriculum for Wales. And I know that the report has been quite critical in places of the Curriculum for Wales guidance in maths. And so for me, the thing that really stood out is, okay, yes, I agree with some of this stuff, but so what? Like, what are we going to do next? And I'm sure that Estyn would say that's not their job, to do the so what next? But I'm sort of chomping at the bit really to kind of say, how are we going to actually have this report make an impact in our classrooms?
And Cameron, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so first and foremost, when reading it, it was quite a depressing read, and just because I found myself nodding and that I agreed with a lot of it from a secondary perspective, having worked in CSC and being fortunate enough really to having been in almost every maths department in South Wales. That variability is real. Pulling on what Laurence said, we know we've got non-specialists teaching who are doing their very, very best, that aren't trained necessarily to deliver what is a really tough subject to teach. I always describe it as the subject that's sort of the easiest to teach badly if you want to. It's kind of all there for you in terms of it. It could be dry. It could be misconstrued. So that support is just not there. When I was in the consortia, it was me and another colleague, and we were spread very, very thin. And the appetite for that support is there. But of course, it's creating the space to allow those people to do it. So I suppose when reading it, no big surprises, but it definitely resonated with what I've seen out in the real world.
I mean, it's always been the case, I guess, that people have been pulled into maths departments in secondary. I mean, I've got my secondary hat on here now. I mean, it happened to me. I mean, I'm a music teacher and I had a bit of space on my timetable. Oh, you can teach maths, there's always room for another one in the maths department. But I suppose the thing that kind of strikes me about this is that the whole of the last 10 years or more than 10 years has been about trying for some education reforms to address issues with our PISA results, which are primarily, about literacy and numeracy, really, and sort of reasoning and things. And our reforms don't appear to have actually made things better. They seem to have made things significantly worse. And I know that there will be debate about the extent to which there is or isn't detail and, there is or isn't subject specificity or knowledge and all of that kind of thing. But it would appear that the choice has been made in order to improve our maths kind of performance, amongst others, to get rid of subject-specific detail in a department that frequently has non-specialists in it. I mean, that doesn't feel sensible to me.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Tom.
Yeah, I've got a couple of points about the PISA thing. First of all, I'd like to commend Estyn for putting that chart in where Wales is at the bottom, because so often you actually have to hunt for this stuff, don't you? These international comparisons where actually the answer is that we're not doing very well. And that's okay. Like, we shouldn't bury our heads in the sand about that. We should be open about it so that we can improve it. So that's my first point. My second point is there's lots of stuff going on, isn't there? Like there's COVID. But another thing that's going on that I think is often overlooked is that the cohorts that are currently 16, 17, 18 are some of the first cohorts that had the extended early years in primary school as well. And I'd like to just note that early years is absent from this report. It says we start at age 7. So for those of you who are listening who might be teaching in nursery reception year 1, in theory we're starting in year 2, although they do include some examples from year 1, which is a little confusing. But actually there's some other stuff at play there. There are other older policy reforms, because I'm conscious that the curriculum for Wales is still incredibly new, right, especially in secondary. And perhaps some of these cohorts that are coming out in these charts, it's quite easy to put the blame at Curriculum for Wales' door, isn't it? But really, they haven't been through a system where they've had Curriculum for Wales. So maybe it is the answer. I don't know whether I personally think it is, but, maybe it is. But there are other policy areas where decisions were made 10 years ago that are now starting to come through, and maybe it's time to look back at some of those.
So there are a number of different issues that we can dig into here, but maybe the report points at 3 key areas that we could dig into. It talks about effective teaching, it talks about principles of effective curriculum, and it talks about professional learning. And I had a question. I wanted to come to the curriculum first because it's something that's come up in conversation already. And I've got quite a basic question. It's to what extent have you found, because I don't know a great deal, I haven't looked in a great deal of detail at the maths and numeracy area of learning and experience. So I want to know to what extent you have found it in your various different roles useful and usable as a framework from which to plan and teach maths. So don't mind who wants to tackle that one first.
I'll start if it's okay. I'll pass to Laurence because we're at the different ends of this spectrum. So when I look at it as an experienced teacher, I get excited. I can see the opportunities. I know where I would link different topics together. I would feel comfortable. But that's on the back of 20 years of doing it. So that would be my experience. But Laurence, you're, as I say, at a different end of this. Just coming in. So, how did you feel when you first saw it? Were you able to plan effectively from it, or did you need more?
I think as a novice teacher coming into the profession, it's very high level. And to try and draw a lesson or a sequence of lessons out from the statements that they give you within it can be quite challenging. I mean, I think if you ask me this question again in 5 years, I might have a different perspective of it. And I always try to link those statements of what matters to my lessons so that they would often form an objective of what we were going to achieve. But it doesn't give you much detail beyond that. You're then left to go and fill that detail out yourself. We were fortunate to have a visit during the PGCE from an organisation who is fleshing some of that detail out, and that work will be published next year. And I think that will be very useful, especially for novice teachers, to help them understand where we should be taking each area, how the challenge can be produced, and which areas link together really neatly within the Curriculum for Wales. I think that would help because, I'm looking now at a teaching timetable of 46 lessons a fortnight. It's quite daunting to think that next year they're going to be coming thick and fast, and to have to draw the detail out of the Curriculum for Wales and produce those lessons, high quality lessons frequently, can be quite a daunting prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking, Laurence, you mentioned there about the colleagues from Swansea University that are developing those resources that came in and delivered a session with us. Wasn't it interesting, the conversation we had around the proficiencies? There wasn't a truly unified, shared understanding of exactly what those proficiencies meant.
Yeah, a great conversation with them about it. What does fluency mean? And they're the guys who are looking at this every day, full time, and they couldn't really agree with what. And there was no direction from Welsh Government either as to what that truly meant. It was very much interpretation. And I think a lot of Curriculum for Wales is interpretation. And if you've got non-specialist subject teachers, that's a concern.
The proficiencies come up quite a lot in this report, don't they, as being this issue, and some proficiencies being sort of favoured and taught more. Fluency comes up as one of those knotty issues.
It's really
interesting. You've got to be in your bonnet about this, haven't you, Sian?
So many bees in so many bonnets. I thought it was really... There was a sentence where it said, fluency is prioritised over the proficiencies. And I was thinking to myself, fluency is a proficiency. And there was another couple of things where it said, in the very best lessons, the proficiencies were developed naturally. And again, I'm not sure how helpful that is really. Like, what does it mean to sort of develop a proficiency naturally. And again, it probably comes down to, like you were saying, Cam, like some teachers have got kind of lots of experience and lots of skill in teaching this content. But actually, for beginner teachers, I don't feel that the curriculum for Wales is particularly helpful at all. I think it's incredibly vague and broad, and at primary in particular, where we haven't got other documentation that might help us, such as exam specifications and things. It gives teachers a really, really challenging task. So I had a little look at the fraction decimal percentages section, and looking at progression step 3, there are 166 words that cover the entire curriculum about fractions decimal percentages for years 4, year 5 and year 6. And this is an area that lots of teachers find incredibly challenging to teach. And I think a bit of additional guidance, like the guidance that's going to be produced. And it is worth saying that clearly this has been recognised by Welsh Government because they are producing additional guidance. But I think we need that. And again, there's lots of stuff around pitch and expectations. So high expectations is a huge thread. And if I give the example here, I can use my knowledge of equivalence to compare the size of simple fractions, decimals and percentages. What that looks like, comparing the size of a decimal, could be vastly different in 2 different classrooms. If I take a fractions example, in one classroom, we could be looking at fifths, and the teacher could say, okay, what's bigger, 1/5 or 3/5? In another classroom, we could be looking at mixed numbers that of non-like fractions. So what's bigger, 1 and 7/8 or 1 and 9/10? And there's vastly different maths happening in those 2 classrooms, but they're both doing that statement in theory. So this is where pitch and expectations are, I think, incredibly challenging. And at primary, we're looking at generalists. We're looking at supporting teachers who have to teach all of the AOLEs. We're going to have some that are math specialists, we're going to have some that aren't. So the systems need to be baked in, I think, to the resources in order to be able to support the person who is the least confident in maths to be able to deliver the curriculum in the same way as the person who's most confident in maths. And I don't feel personally that what we've currently got in the Curriculum for Wales and in the numeracy framework as well, it's worth saying there's more in there, supports teachers to do that very best job. And I think that's why we get things like bought-in curriculum programmes, because there the level of detail is specified. It's not that teachers don't want to do the work, although I do think workload's an issue as well with having these kind of statements. I think it's that teachers are crying out for additional guidance, and they want that guidance. So it's refreshing to hear Estyn sort of suggesting that we should be giving some of that.
They don't shy away from it at all. They say often schools felt that they didn't have enough guidance. It wasn't clear enough because there was too much information for them to interpret in each AOLE. The guidance wasn't specific enough about minimum expectations or the progress, as you were talking about, that people should make. As a result, there was lots of sort of variability of interpretation, and schools were spending too much time trying to decipher guidance without the confidence that they've correctly interpreted what they have to do. And, what are schools going to do in that situation? Is it easier to just go, that thing exists, that I can buy off the shelf, that's doing what we're trying to do, it's quicker, they're right here now, I can implement it straight away.
We don't have the counterfactual either, do we? Like, maybe it would have been worse if schools hadn't bought in that curriculum programme. Like, we don't necessarily know. Like, schools are doing what they think is best with the resources that they have, and often maybe that is the right choice. I'll say as well on pitch, in a couple of my sessions, I select a couple of questions from various different maths resources, like the NCETM resources, the White Maths resources, and I have the student teachers do those questions and work through the steps, and then we talk about the steps they need to take, etc. And then I tend to ask them, what year group do you think this would be appropriate for? And without fail, we think it's harder. It's a year 1 question, we think it's year 3. It's a year 4 question, we think it's year 6. And again, that concerns me a little bit, like what is happening in schools in terms of pitch and expectations? Because the other thing that I think it's important to note is that in my role, and in your role as well, Cam, currently, we don't really actually see many qualified maths teachers teaching, right? Like, we're focusing on the student teachers, and I'm always kind of conscious to say that my opinions often are quite coloured by what I see in student teachers' classrooms, but they see what's happening. And the fact that they're coming back with these kind of slightly lower expectations than we would hope is quite telling, I think.
Yeah, definitely, Sian. I was just going to pull back to the fractions percentage kind of progression thing, and then I'll probably do this several times past Laurence, just to kind of validate or disagree, feel free to, around that conversation around progression. That's something that we spend a lot of time on. I suppose we've got the benefit of having the time to do that, looking at starting with common denominators. So you've got your 1/5, 2/5. Where next? Where's the challenge next? Okay, so it's uncommon denominators, fine. Where next? We got mixed numbers. We've got numbers that are improper, or fractions that are improper. Sorry. It's getting our student teachers to think about that trajectory and that continuum of progression. We get a chance to do that in a small number of topic areas. Do our school teachers have the support, and our non-specialists have the support and time and space to do that level of thinking that Sian's talked about, or do they just randomly go at a statement of what matters? And that's a concern.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of evidence just in the year that I've been in schools learning myself that type of pedagogy is unpacked and really thought about in a lot of detail. I think it would be really useful, and I think the professional learning section of the report does highlight that there is huge benefits to that, but it's not been my experience to date. Talking to my peers, though, there are other schools which I think do some of this and do it particularly well. I think some of the lead schools from the partnership achieve this and get good outcomes from it. But yeah, to date, it hasn't been a huge experience of mine that we unpack how that's taught or how that challenge is perceived.
And this is one of my big bugbears just in life, not specifically to maths, which is the report consistently contains the phrase high expectations and the question, do you have high expectations of your pupils? The answer to that is always going to be yes, isn't it? I know that teachers aren't going to say, no, actually, I've got really low expectations. We all aspire to have high expectations. But actually, what high expectations means is in the subject. Having high expectations isn't just, I'm expecting them to be able to sit still and complete the work in my lesson. It might well be being able to compare fractions with non-common denominators. That might be the high expectation. So if we haven't specified what the expectations are, what use is it to be asking people, do you have high expectations, when we're not telling them what that should be?
I think we've got a responsibility to demonstrate what high expectations looks like. I mean, just a very quick anecdote, but when I was in school, a local school, our GCSE results in 3 years went from in the 50s to in the 80s. And of course, that attracted attention. What were you doing? What scheme of work were you using? All of the... And actually, do you know what? We didn't change a huge amount. What we did is we raised the bar hugely. We just set much, much higher expectations. And the outcome was pretty substantial. So I do wonder whether we need to model that somehow.
I think that comes from building a confidence that we can do maths and we can do it well. And the report says, we are a nation that takes a pride in saying, I don't understand maths. And now that I've been involved in this world for the last year, 18 months, I do challenge people when I say, I'm going to be a maths teacher, and they look at me and the first thing they say, I don't understand maths. And they say it in front of their children. And I call them out on it straight away. I say, you can do maths. You're really good at it. You are good at maths, and you need to make sure that your children understand that. So we're not devaluing this really important skill that is critical to a child's education.
The more you're all saying here, and also sort of joining some dots with other conversations about education here in Wales we've had in recent months, the more I think there's a picture emerging here. Because if you read what Estyn say about good maths teaching versus less good maths teaching, and we hear what you're saying about set your expectations high, but we hear what Sian's saying about the fact that people who are not very confident in understanding sort of maths teaching don't quite know where to pitch that bar. It seems to me the sort of the common feature of this is if you have strong subject knowledge in the subject and it has been developed into a very strong and comprehensive pedagogical content knowledge, subject-specific pedagogical content knowledge. So you're not only a maths boffin, but you've actually spent time working out how your subject is taught and how pupils learn in it and in what order and what you do about misconceptions and things like that. And so I find myself thinking, well, this whole sort of curriculum reform appears to be predicated on the assumption that schools are full of top quality subject specialists. Unfortunately, we appear to be in the middle of a recruitment and retention crisis. And we sort of know that they're not. We've heard the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Lynn Neagle, about a year ago, talk about providing tools and templates to kind of deal with variability in secondary. And some of those things are starting to trickle in. But we're also hearing noises from Welsh Government when they put bids out saying, please don't make stuff. We don't need any more stuff. There's plenty of stuff. Don't make any more. So what should these tools and templates be looking like? If it's not piles of stuff which we know no one's got time to look at.
We talked about this quite a lot last year, didn't we, Cam? We looked across the border to the teaching hubs system that they've got in England, and the maths hubs in particular have been incredibly successful. And we were quite shocked actually to find that something like 75% of schools in England engage in maths hubs. And that is getting schools together, collaborating, having these conversations around what does progression look like? What is fluency? Are we pitching things in the same level? Can I come to your school and observe you teaching? And I think that more of that and more structures and formalised structures to be in place. And I know that there have previously been structures in place that have slightly fallen by the wayside, perhaps, and Estyn kind of recognise that, don't they, in the report? And then I think more specific guidance around what does it actually look like, this particular statement broken down. And the consortia have been doing some of this work. So Central South have released a document where they've essentially broken down all the statements of what matters into kind of more like bite-sized learning intention type statements, which is really incredibly useful for all teachers. But again, not all teachers have got access to that. And it needs to be consistent across Wales so that we don't have a bit of a postcode lottery as to what support that you are able to access. So that would be my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm just conscious, we're talking about more professional learning, but the timetable is rammed. It's busy. And I don't see, just from the year that I've spent in schools, a lot of time for teachers to get out of the classroom and go and do these type of activities where they will learn from other schools, unless Welsh Government is going to create some financial space and time for them to do it. I think it's probably required and needed, but it's certainly going to be a challenging thing to implement in the short term.
I totally agree with what you said, Tom. You're right. If we had a huge, vast pool of high quality subject specialists, let's do it. Sadly, we don't. We have pockets of that, of course we do, but we have more and more non-specialists teaching our subject. And in terms of what do we need, it's a great question. Do we need more bits of paper or digital paper? Probably not. Do we need more space to kind of have the conversations that we have in a PGCE year in your second, third, fourth, fifth year of teaching? Probably, but what, Laurence, 46, you said?
Yeah, 46 lessons a fortnight.
Where's the space for that?
That's an NQT timetable.
Yeah.
So that'll go up another 10% the year after. So the teaching timetable is hard and fast. Yeah.
But I mean, what Sian, a unified national approach to professional learning has to be the way forward. Having worked in a consortium that looks after a region, I suppose you could say, we know that that's always going to lead to variability, isn't it? Unless you have that high-level national approach. So I know we're moving in that direction. Pace needs to increase.
I do think as well that the professional learning section of this report, so as Emma said earlier, it's split into 3. I think there are some really useful questions at the end. So if anyone listening is thinking like, oh gosh, I'm a maths leader, I'm a head of department, what can I do? I think looking at those questions at the end could be really, really helpful in talking about them as a department, as a teaching team, because as Laurence says, sometimes the time is short, so actually making better use of that time, perhaps. Not that people don't make good use of it, but do you know what I mean?
And we're not off the hook either in initial teacher education. Maybe another big elephant in the room here is that, how much do we know about the subject knowledge, expertise, pedagogical subject knowledge, expertise within the ITE system? I know on a basic level that we don't have the capacity to cover all of the expressive arts subject disciplines here on our programmes, and that there's sort of variability in terms of the amount of time that's dedicated to each respective discipline within the expressive arts. The report talks about this. The report emphasises that not only do the student teachers and the teachers out there need to have really good subject knowledge, it says that tutors in the best sort of scenarios had, within ITE, secure subject knowledge, demonstrated a strong understanding of subject pedagogy and confidently helped student teachers to develop these. It even talked about teacher educators knowing their student teachers so well. So knowing that, I know that my drama cohorts, some of them will come from, various different backgrounds, pure drama and theatre. Some have been actors, have taken a less academic route. We'll get into the variability, the different routes in terms of maths. But knowing that helps me to tailor my approach. But I wonder, what will be the consequences for us in IT, and when is that sort of eye of Sauron going to turn its attention to perhaps the lack of subject expertise and proficiency and experience within ITE? Before we get into that, I'm curious to know, actually, maybe Cameron and Sian, you'll be able to give me a sense of this. It might be harder for primary, but maybe I'm making an assumption. What range of subject knowledge and proficiency do you work with within ITE, and what challenges does this present?
Increasingly broad, I would say. I haven't been here for that long, but into sort of my 5th, 6th cohort now, so I'm long enough to see a sort of trajectory, and I would say we're increasingly looking at maths PGCE students coming from broader backgrounds. So I haven't done the stats on this, but sort of you might get 30, 40, 50% that come from your maths undergraduate in Cardiff University, for example. And then the other mix comes from associated. So, we have our engineers, myself included, but then we have psychology. We're even getting to the point now where you're starting to think, okay, so you haven't quite met that 50% at undergraduate level, but you've got a strong A level, you've got some experience. Do we give you a go?
Yep.
That's the
reality.
That's the reality. There's no point in us having this conversation and hiding around that. That is the direction of travel.
I'm curious, do you think non-math special, or they're not non-math specialists, but from a non-pure math specialist background, do they find it harder? Can you make any assumptions?
Some of my best.
Yeah.
Dare I say it, have not come from a traditional background. Mm. Maybe because they've had those struggles with the subject. I don't know, I'm speculating here, but maybe because they're not the kind of maths boffin.
Or is there an authentic kind of, are they from an applied background? I don't know.
I've got to be honest, I've just submitted my proposal for my ED, and it's going to be looking at exactly this, the identity of those graduates coming through to us.
Yeah, they talk about the curse of knowledge, don't they, in academic papers. I come from a civil engineering background, so there's quite a bit of maths in that, but it's not the same as the guys who have just finished their masters or degrees in Cardiff in maths. They are what I would consider to be the true specialists. I'm a mature student, so I look to bring a bit of kind of real life context to maths classrooms. I talk about running a construction company and the level of maths that you need, because I see so many students who, maybe the engagement is low in class, and I say, well, what are you looking to do when you leave school? And they're like, oh, I want to be a carpenter. And I can look them in the eye and say, well, I employ loads of carpenters, and you need maths to be a carpenter. It's in everything that you do. And it kind of builds that little bit of engagement. But I suppose looking at those who are coming in, I don't see why everybody should be a maths degree holder to teach maths. I don't think you need to be able to, especially in years 7, 8, 9 and GCSE. Maybe at A level, it's a different thing.
And Sian, some of your people are going to be actually genuinely terrified of the subject.
They are. So I asked this question in our very first session. I say, I want to know about people's experiences in the room, and we do a bit of a show of hands. So I've done it now for 3 years. I've never had anyone with a maths degree, but sometimes associated degrees. So psychology, economics, occasionally statistics, which I guess is a maths degree, isn't it? Everyone has done maths to age 16. Some students to 18, majority international students, I think they have to in most countries in the world, will have done maths to 18. But most people drop it at GCSE. It's rare to have a maths A-level, but again, you sometimes have a psychology A-level, where there's been a lot of maths there. I always say to the primary school student teachers exactly what you've just said, Cam, that actually sometimes a subject that you yourself struggle and grapple with can be a real advantage in terms of teaching, because you are able to see and understand the struggles that the children are going through, and also in terms of your planning of lessons. If something comes naturally to you, it's quite hard to be able to communicate that in a way that might break it down for children. Whereas if it's something that you've had to really think about, then you're going to find it easier to communicate that. The kicker is that I say to them, they need to be responsible for their subject knowledge. You don't need to know everything that you're going to be teaching at the start of the year. But if you come across a lesson and you think, oh gosh, I'm not quite sure how to do that, you are responsible for doing the research, for going and finding out how you should be teaching it before you stand up in front of that class. Because when I've seen some really poor maths lessons, often it is the maths that lets people down. They're not entirely clear on the steps that they're taking. And then when they get up and try and model something, things fall apart a little bit. But yeah, I would say that there's something about primary school teaching that doesn't necessarily appeal particularly to STEM graduates, like on the whole. Like usually most people are more literature, humanities, arts, like usually. And I think we see this as well in what they choose to do in their cross-phase studies. Often we'll have huge groups of expressive arts, primary cohort, and we'll have a very small number of primary teachers choosing to do maths. Despite this, I do often hear from student teachers and from mentors that maths is an area that they feel most confident in teaching, and they didn't think that would be the case. And I think it's coming back to your point, Cam. I totally agree that maths is one of the easiest subjects to get very badly wrong. But I also think that there are certain steps that you can take in planning and teaching maths that if you apply those consistently, you can get quite good at teaching maths quite quickly. And I hope to, as part of the ITE programme, I hope that I communicate those steps to them so that they grow in confidence.
So where do the people who struggle with identifying those steps go? ChatGPT? Do they go? Where is the support for that? Because you're dead right, Sian. But are we relying on Google?
Yes. So I give them a load of resources and I say to them, like, these are resources that have been created by maths experts. So things like the National Centre for Excellence in Teaching Mathematics, they break down, it's the English curriculum, but, you know, a lot of the maths is the same. They break down the curriculum into more specific examples, and also there's more guidance for teachers there on how to break that down. There's a website called Oak National. Have you guys come across this? Yeah, and on that they have recorded lessons on basically every single area of maths you could possibly think of. So student teachers can go and they can watch a lesson of a teacher teaching a specific content. The same with Khan Academy. They can watch someone modelling that particular concept. I'm absolutely not suggesting they pick that up and then deliver that, but this is for their own specific subject knowledge. But again, it would be great if we had that specifically for the curriculum for Wales, because people are going hunting.
Yeah. The pedagogy is so important though, isn't it? My students joke at me for saying this over and over, but like maths is maths. Like it's been around for a long time. You know, we're not going to reinvent it in Wales. It's the pedagogy of how you teach it. I remember again in my support days of when the new curriculum came out, and you know I was presenting this document to all the heads of maths in Central South Wales. Quite a daunting experience actually. And we looked at it, and it was number, funnily enough. It was algebra, it was statistics, it was geometry, and it was numerical reasoning. And it was like, well, yeah, that's exactly how it was before. It's no different. No, the content's the same, but how you teach it is different.
And that's maybe the harder one to address, because I hear what you're saying. Yeah, you can say you're responsible. You need to go, and you would hope then that in the moment in the lesson, having done that homework, they can be responsive. But responsive teaching was something that came up in the report. It identified that where teaching was less effective, teachers didn't practice responsive teaching within maths, often due to a lack of confidence in their subject knowledge and pedagogy. You know, this was something that I took umbrage in a talk that was recently given by somebody from Welsh Government who's given us an update. And, you know, they took it really well. They were quite transparent about the variability in schools. But he was giving the example of quadratic equations and how, kids are going to learn best when you tell them the why. And no one can argue with that. Why are we learning quadratic equations? Kids are going to learn best if the teacher knows how to tailor their approaches to, where they're at that moment, and they're doing that responsively in the lesson. And every corridor you go down, you come back to, what does that depend on? Somebody who has the range of pedagogical content knowledge, subject knowledge, to be able to go, okay, this isn't working, where do I go next? And you see the negative outcomes and consequences of this as well in the less effective teachers who are very task driven. Their safety net is, I'm going to keep them busy. It talks about they're very much sort of active doing a task, but any time it has to kind of range because they're not doing so well in that task, or using questioning to try and really find out whether they understand, because this was another point that came through, was that the best teachers were really checking for understanding. They had a really good understanding of their pupils' understanding. The place where it falls down is subject knowledge, is that kind of hinterland of subject that subject experts do have. So that's a hard one. I don't have the answers for this. The sources that you've talked about, Sian, are going to take you so far. So what's the professional learning upshot there to make people more confident in their pedagogy and doing that live in an ephemeral classroom situation day after day?
Yeah, I thought the report was quite interesting in its sort of level of depth with this, because in some ways it's extremely high level. It's like very high level recommendations. But then with the sort of case studies, it goes like very, very deep. And you're getting some really specific recommendations like mini whiteboards and multiple choice questions, or they call them something else, but that's what they meant. And I thought that was quite interesting because we've got sort of Estyn there almost recommending certain pedagogical approaches, which is maybe slightly different to what they would usually do. Like usually you could say you can choose your pedagogical approach. And I almost felt like at points we were sort of veering in towards a bit of a toolkit sort of territory.
Green and purple pens all over again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, there's pros and cons to that. I personally, I've done a bit of school improvement work, and I do think being really clear around expectations in terms of different techniques that you can use to achieve X, Y, Z. And again, they reference various Doug Lemov techniques, no opt-out, cold call, and things are referenced in there. That can be incredibly helpful in a school where improvement needs to happen rapidly. But Estyn aren't recommending that all schools apply that unilaterally. So then again, we're in this slight professional learning void, aren't we? Like we're expecting schools to go out and hunt for the answers without really giving them the answers, just giving them some hints.
It's interesting, that multiple choice thing. I just want to pull on that quickly, because what they talk about is diagnostic questions. So we have to understand why we're doing it. We're not doing multiple choice for the sake of multiple choice. We're doing diagnostic questions because there's one right answer and there are three misconceptions, common misconceptions. So it's actually the subject knowledge, knowing that is a likely area that they may go wrong on, so that the multiple choice becomes purposeful in identifying those misconceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
and there's
comes back
loads
to
of
knowing that, doesn't it? Because you could
Yes.
I could do a multiple choice, just 4 random numbers, pointless. But 1 correct and 3 subtle misconceptions, brilliant.
loads of great activities that you can use to get a verbal classroom. So people discussing things like always, sometimes, never. Put a question up. Is this true always? Is it sometimes, never? And you'll get such a spread of answers most of the time. And then you can dive into that with the pupils, and them being able to vocalize their thoughts can, especially in a pupil voice, can really help other pupils then understand what that misconception is, and you can tease it out if you have that subject matter knowledge.
Yeah, and again, they talk about dialogic teaching, don't they, in there? I was just thinking, was that something else that I'd read? But no, it was in there. And again, that's another really useful tool, like teaching tool. Like, are Estyn saying we need to do this? Or actually they're just sort of recognising that that's one thing that we could do. So I think that a lot of that section is very helpful in terms of, I don't disagree with any of it. I think it sounds good. It sounds like assessment, feedback, responsive teaching. Yes, we should be doing more of this. But I'm questioned slightly how schools are going to be able to take that and use it. And I know that's not the purpose of the report, but I think I'm sort of desperate for the next step. Like, let's have it make impact. Let's have this report mean something.
And where should it come in? Because they make recommendations for Welsh Government, for local education authorities, for senior leaders, for department leaders, for teachers in the classroom. They do break that down. But I wonder, like, what are your thoughts in terms of like where do the experts need to be? Do they need to be in schools? And in which types of schools? Because again, in the report, if you had a department who had a lot of expertise, the curriculum design was really coherent, they had a system in place to develop teachers within the school who were struggling with their pedagogical content knowledge and their pedagogical sort of approaches and practice in the classroom. So, where in the system does that need to be, and how does the system make sure that the right people are accessing it? Because every corridor we go down, subject expert is what is needed, isn't it?
So having been somebody who sort of, I never felt entirely comfortable with it, to be honest, winged into a school and, let me help you sort out your maths department. That's not the way to go, in my personal opinion. There are subject specialists who are brilliant teachers in that school already. Let's just say the head of department, for example. Often, because they haven't got enough subject specialists, they're teaching a rammed timetable to get where the school needs to be. They haven't got time to do the support that they need. So we've got it. It's there. How do we give them the time and space to allow them to develop in their school, rather than paying somebody a daft amount of money to come in for a day and sort it out? That doesn't work.
So Welsh Government should be pulling all the levers available to them to recruit and retain subject matter specialists. I mean, and they do some of that already with a grant that's paid. But if we're identifying this, and it seems like Estyn are, that this is a problem and it's key to the Welsh economy, in our numeracy capability, surely they need to pull every lever available to them to make sure that we are recruiting these people into IT and then moving on into maths teaching professions. I don't feel like they're stretching every sinew. Maybe.
Thinking about one of those levers, I mean, just looking inward for a moment maybe, but also perhaps, Laurence, you'll have something to say on this. Historically, there has been a tendency, perhaps in Wales, maybe elsewhere, I don't know, when there is an issue, to look at the teaching profession as a whole and see the size of it and the super tanker-like nature of the teaching profession and go, oh, let's do something to initial teacher education instead because it's smaller. We can poke them with a stick and make it look like we're doing something. And it does make me think, Cameron, you're talking about the fact that we've widened our net for our subject intakes, which is not actually in many ways a bad thing. I think possibly previously we didn't have to, and now we do have to, and that's great. But the PGCE is still 9 months long. And actually, when I did mine, I got paid to do it. And people don't get, fall off your chair, Laurence. And we don't pay people now. And so there's always the possibility that people with levers might look at the lever marked ITE and go, well, that's an easier lever to pull than the teaching profession one. If they were to do that, what would we like them to do? And maybe what would we not like them to do?
I'm interested in your thoughts on that, Laurence.
Because we've just beasted you through 9 months of a PGC, and now you're off to do 46 hours a fortnight of teaching. And you're kind of okay because you have got a decent maths background. But if you didn't have a decent maths background, or if you come out of someone else's PGC and were going in to teach maths, how could we have made that better?
Yeah, I suppose one of the challenges that those who have a mathematics or mathematics related degree probably have the option or possibility to go and work in a quite highly paid role, whether that's going over to London or internationally to work in finance sector. You've got to take some of those people and encourage them to do some teaching. Maybe it's teaching part of their career. Maybe it's coming into the profession after they've done that for a few years and working out it's not all that they wanted. But recruitment into the profession does seem to me to be a key aspect if you don't have that subject matter specialism.
So we can't offer the money. That we're never going to match the, Deloitte kind of salaries. That's never good. So what was your motivation, Laurence, for kind of coming into, slightly later in your career into teaching?
So I have 3 young sons who are primary school age now, and I got involved in their school and I saw how they were being taught maths, and it interested me. They're being taught maths in a different way than how I was taught when I was young. And I started doing a bit of teaching with them, and I realised that I had a bit of an aptitude to it. So I explored the possibility of it. And before I knew, I've kind of just found myself here in Cardiff Met in a September course sitting in a maths classroom. It all happened so fast, doesn't it?
Total accident.
They all say that, yeah.
Sounding like kidnap, Laurence.
But I've really enjoyed, the last 12 months has been fantastic. It's been really enjoyable. So I was looking for a change of career because I wasn't particularly enjoying what I was doing, and that this gave me an avenue to go and do something different. The money side of it definitely wasn't the big draw into the profession. Giving something back, I served in the military, and for that part of my career, I always felt like being part of a bigger organisation, doing something that was strategically important, was important to me personally, and I feel like teaching and education plays to that strength for me. I like the idea that I'm, hopefully going to impact children's lives in the future in a positive way. So those aspects, maybe they could be used to promote the teaching profession more strongly.
Interesting.
Longer PGCEs, more subject knowledge inputs.
It is amazing that we wave goodbye, isn't it?
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah,
You know.
it is. And having graduated from a 4-year BA secondary with QTS program, and I know that wouldn't be an option for everyone. But over those 4 years, everything that we did subject wise was with a view to teach it. So we were developing our pedagogical content knowledge the whole way. We took time. Imagine what we could do with a 2-year PGCE.
I had the opposite experience in that I did Teach First, where I think I can only remember one maths lecture maybe I'm misremembering. There must have been more than that, surely. But we did 6 weeks intensive, and then we were out in schools doing every other Wednesday afternoon at the university. And it's interesting kind of to reflect on that, because I didn't have some of the content that I'm now delivering. And I got there, but again, would my journey have been quicker? Would I have been more effective in those early years had I had that content? Maybe. But there's something obviously we work in partnership with schools. And I do think that a lot of what is most beneficial to student teachers does come through those placements, and the quality of the mentoring that they have on those placements and the provision that they're observing is incredibly important. But yeah, I wouldn't argue with making it a bit longer.
Do we have an opportunity, though, to join up what we do in induction in our NQT year?
Yeah.
Now feels like the time to me.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's coming, because it does feel mad that you're out the door now, right? Bye. It would be so great to be able to continue that relationship. So not a 2-year PGCE, but a 2-year sort of new teacher development program that takes that kind of NQT year in.
I'm just going to take us back to curriculum one more time, because I know that, Sian, you're in this sort of unique position that you have taught in England. You're quite familiar, and I know that's part of your prep. You've had a look and done a bit of compare and contrast. We did have someone from Welsh Government who made a clear stipulation between a content-driven curriculum and what we've got here, which is a process curriculum. I'm hearing a lot now, because it's the process that the schools go through to design their own locally relevant curricula that that makes the difference to how it lands on the ground to learners. He talked in that session about content-driven curriculums that sort of fall down because the teachers who are teaching them don't know how those decisions were made. They weren't part of that process. And I can see that argument. Why did you choose that content over that content? So, Sian, compare and contrast. To what extent, does the curriculum that they've got in England, thinking about the same problems, support the non-subject maths subject specialists versus what we've got going on over here? Is there anything we can learn from that?
So I can only speak to primary because I don't have any experience of maths teaching in secondary in England. But yeah, I did teach maths in England for 4 years, year 1, year 3, year 5 and year 6. And during that time, the curriculum in England actually came out. So I had a couple of years where we didn't really have anything because there was a bit of a vacuum when the Conservative government, the coalition government came in and they got rid of the previous curriculum but didn't yet release the new curriculum. So we had a little bit of a vacuum there. But speaking of the 2014 curriculum, the England 2014 curriculum, it's broken down by year group. So in each year group, you have a list of bullet points, which are the content that you are expected to teach. And the content, maths, is very similar, but it's broken down significantly compared to the curriculum for Wales. So I had a look at fractions, decimals, percentages, and yeah, there are 166 words in the curriculum for Wales for progression step 3. So years 4, 5 and 6, teachers have got 166 words to go off. And in the English curriculum, I'm not going to be able to find my calculations here, there are 1,508 words for the same sort of equivalent. And lots of that is non-statutory guidance. So there's the statutory stuff that you absolutely have to teach. And sometimes this is going to be challenging, right? Because the stage, not age thing is relevant. And there would be exceptions to that, where if you've got children that aren't able to access that, you are able to differentiate both upwards and downwards, just like we are here in Wales. But in terms of what I'm teaching in year 4, I've basically got my long-term plan mapped out for me, and then I can spend my time doing that other stuff. So I think if we were living in an ideal world where everyone had loads of time and loads of subject knowledge, I'm totally on board with the process stuff. Yes, let's sit down, let's grapple with this, let's become curriculum designers. But we're not living in that world. So for me, the English curriculum is more helpful to a teacher because it gives me a bit of a baseline that I can then build my subject knowledge and build my kind of engagement and my creative ideas on top of without having to go right back to the beginning all of the time. From a maths leadership perspective as well, it essentially is a curriculum map for you for the school. And in Wales, we're asking maths leaders to make that map. And at primary, the maths leader, so to come back to the previous conversation around where should this sit, I would say at primary, you've got maths and numeracy subject leads. And really, those are the people that we would want to be delivering professional learning. But again, they will have a little bit of time for it. It's probably a TLR. But you wouldn't necessarily be on the senior leadership team as maths lead. It's kind of more like a kind of middle leadership position. Maybe you're given an hour or 2 a week to do that. How long does it take to write a calculation policy? How long does it take to interpret? Like, that's going to take so much of their time. And so actually giving them more specific guidance, which is what Swansea University are now producing. So again, Welsh Government do recognise that this is coming, but I think it would solve some of the problems that comes through on this report. And again, around pitch and expectations as well. This is going to be a huge task in primary. In secondary, you've got more of a chance to see the age range. So you've got more of an understanding of where they're going. I could be a year 2 teacher and I've never actually taught year 6 and I don't really know what that even looks like. I'm kind of in my year 2 bubble. So that maths leader needs to be able to have that kind of overview. And also around things like calculation strategies. Schools don't always have a policy around this. So sometimes children are being taught different methods in different year groups. That needs to be sorted out. And really that should come from that kind of middle leadership tier, but it's such an incredibly hard job. And again, that teacher in that role might not be a maths specialist. I don't know whether it necessarily matters too much, because you could say that having the GCSE in maths, age 16, you're sufficiently ahead, kind of like your point around Key Stage 3, sufficiently ahead of the kind of end of year 6 to be able to make those curriculum decisions. But I don't think it's something that's going to happen naturally. It's something that needs to have work and thought gone into it. And I think there's a real danger when we've got all of these schools doing different things that we'll get to the point that we're in now of inconsistency.
That's always been the concern though, isn't it, with curriculum for Wales, is that the best will do it very well. The ones that are struggling for whatever reason will not, and actually will widen the gap. That's always been my concern.
And the gap is widening.
Yeah.
The data says it is.
I think Tom hit the nail on the head for me earlier on when he sort of maybe posited that go back to when this was pitched to us back in sort of 2014-15 time, it all sounded really great, but was there a really clear understanding of the readiness of the profession to meet those challenges? And now we might end up, it would be interesting to look at what this curriculum looks like when they've put in things like one of the recommendations in this report, provide schools with more detail of expectations for pupil progress in mathematics and numeracy to support teachers with their curriculum planning. Are we going to end up with a mixture of a process curriculum, but with some content provision as well that maybe is not on the Welsh Government website, but is in existence? It's that middle tier that Lucy Crehan talked about several years ago now, that, you know, without that, we're going to end up with a variability that actually, quite refreshingly, the same person that came in to talk to us from Welsh Government a few months ago said they are seeing. They're evaluating and they are seeing that variability. So we're going to end up looking more and more like the curriculum in England eventually.
Maybe. But yeah, I think schools are crying out for it a little bit. And I don't know, I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts. I had a couple of conversations with some secondary maths teachers a few weeks ago at a conference, and they sort of said to me, what we really want is for them to have a really solid understanding of place value and to have really strong mental strategies for calculations. We're not really bothered about anything else. If you could just send them up to us with that, please. I remember being quite shocked, like, oh gosh, okay, it seems a bit reductive. You know, we were talking informally, so I'm sure. But I was surprised to see that they talked about how fluency is overemphasized, because my experience would almost be the opposite, that actually we don't have some kind of basic skills. Are you seeing that in secondary schools, that children are coming up lacking the sort of basic skills that you might expect?
Huge variability. So some pupils will be flying and understand all of those things you would expect to do, you know, and working at maybe year 8, year 9 level in year 7. It's fantastic. And then, you know, the pupils who really didn't get it and have been left behind, and you're trying to sweep them up. And, you know, generally year 7 is taught in mixed ability, so that provides those type of challenges. I think with curriculum design, and I've kind of thought of this as the way that I teach, I rely on this kind of 3 R's approach, and it's not the old 3 R's for the older listeners. A robust curriculum, something that's really rooted in thought out processes of a scheme of work. Resilient pupils. So, and I have this idea of starting my maths teaching with, hi, I'm Mr. Hooper. I'm not your maths teacher. I'm your resilience teacher. And maths is the vehicle that we're going to use to teach you resilience, because we're all going to struggle at some point, and we've got to overcome those struggles, and we don't want to give up. And when I've employed people in the past, you want a workforce that's resilient. They keep going and they keep working at it. And then a reflective learner. So the 3 R's of robust, resilience, and reflective, so that they can understand that kind of metacognition of how I learn, what I've learned, what I haven't learned well, and go back and reflect on what they can do. So they're the 3 R's of curriculum design that I have come up with.
How quickly can we second you into Welsh Government, Laurence? I mean, if anyone's listening out there. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Final question, I guess, it's a little bit of a catch-all question. Is there anything that we haven't covered about, because you're all subject specialists here, is there anything we haven't covered that you would have liked to come out in this episode that hasn't already? If the answer is no, then it's fine.
I think one of the challenges for maths teachers out there, you know, having seen it on the ground for the last year, is engagement. You know, there's a lot of children there who maybe have had a tough time learning maths at home. There's not a lot of maths knowledge, so trying to bring an activity that brings the pupils in, they taste that bit of success. They see that maths is everywhere in everything that they do, and they're going to need it in the future. One of my favourite lessons is about probability, and we look at Doritos roulette. So in Doritos roulette, you get a spicy chip, 1 in every 7, but we don't give that piece of information away at the start. We put a bowl of Doritos on the table, and we do a bit of maths about, pick the Dorito out. Is it going to be a spicy one? What's the probability it's going to be a spicy one? Okay, you got a spicy one. What's the probability the next one's going to be a spicy one? And building that engagement, because the pupils love it, then you can hook them in for, you know, a whole module of work, and hopefully for the rest of their lives. But I think building that engagement is really key.
There's subject knowledge in that as well, though, isn't there? You know, relative frequency, probability, what's the difference? Do they compare? you have to know that to be able to make those,
You
those links.
You could imagine a non-subject specialist latching onto the bowl of Doritos.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And not.
Not get,
Yeah. So this is where you need to be not a boffin as well, because you could imagine a boffin doing that probability thing very boringly, and you could imagine a non-subject specialist messing about with Doritos, but it takes both of those things to make that work.
Yeah, which is pedagogical content knowledge again, is I'm going to teach this thing. What are the many different ways that I could do it? What do I know about the kids in front of me that will dictate to me the best way to go about doing this? Go for it, Cam.
The only other thing that I would have quite like to discuss, I suppose, is it's nice to see it actually being recognised that we do need to teach kids stuff, how to do things directly. I'll maybe quantify that. Because I think there was a period of time where we thought, do you know what, if they all work in groups and solve problems, then everything's going to sort of slot together.
Yeah.
And that is a part of what we do, but it's not all of what we do. We have to teach them to know things, funnily enough, as well. And that does come out in the report.
And sometimes there's no local relevance to that. You don't do that in a locally relevant way.
Sian, final thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Cam. Yeah, there was a sentence about the balance of explicit teaching, and I wrote it down because I liked what they said. Time for pupils to explore concepts, collaborate with each other, think and talk about them, and develop mathematical independence. And I thought, yeah, there's quite a lot of sentences and bits in the report that I think, yes, like this is right. They've kind of really hit the nail on the head. But as I say, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. What next? That's what I'd like to see.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. If you wish to read this report in full, you can go to the Estyn website, or you can simply Google Unlocking Potential, Insights into Improving Teaching and Leadership in Mathematics Education. It was published in June of 2025. Okay, thank you ever so much for giving so generously of your time. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks' time.
You've been listening to Emma and Tom Talk Teaching, a podcast about all things education, presented by Emma O'Dooher and Tom Breeze. The special guests this episode were Laurence Hooper from our PGCE Secondary Maths course, Cameron Stewart and Sian Wickersham, colleagues here from Cardiff Met. Thanks to all three for taking part. Podcast artwork is by Beth Blandford and the music is by Cameron Stewart. We're on social media at Talk Teaching Pod if you want to come and say hello. We'll be back in a fortnight with something else interesting. Until then, take care and enjoy teaching.